Number 10. Hungry Queensland crocodiles. Queensland, Australia has got to be the worst place in the world for getting attacked by crocodiles. There is no better example of just how dangerous the Queensland waterways are than the recent story of Lee DePau, who narrowly escaped with his life after being mauled by hungry crocs. It began on Sunday morning. Lee, only 18 years old, was at the Johnston River with a girl he had been hanging out with the day before. The girl was only a visitor, a young backpacker checking out Australia. He thought he could impress her by leaping into the crocodile-infested waters. What he didn't anticipate was for the huge reptile to lunge out of the water and snap onto his arm. Before Lee even knew what was going on, his left arm had almost been ripped clean in half. Speaking with Channel 9's Today Show just a few days later, Lee explained that he had done it all because he was extremely attracted to the girl and he thought she'd be impressed. Well, she wasn't. In fact, she didn't even know he had been attacked. She thought he was joking as he screamed and thrashed around in the water. It wasn't until he managed to escape and climb ashore that she realized his arm was almost completely off. Luckily, Lee made it to the hospital in time to get fixed up and is expected to make a full recovery. Still, Queensland is definitely not the place to be jumping into random rivers. Number 9. Kenyan hyenas. Kenya is known for a lot of things: Mount Kilimanjaro, safaris, and deadly hyenas that occasionally eat people while they're asleep. Kenya is one of the most dangerous places when it comes to predatory hyenas, hunting and eating people. Just a few years ago, a pack of hyenas tracked down and killed 2 children and injured 6 of their family members in a brazen midnight attack. According to the Kenya Wildlife Service, one of the survivors had to be airlifted to the nearest major hospital in the capital of Nairobi. The attack came while the family slept in their traditional compound, known in the local language as Manyata. The hyenas broke into the house, stole the 2 smallest children, and bit the sleeping people just to show them who's boss. Then they ran away. Unfortunately for the local villagers, this was not the first time an incident like this occurred. Hyenas are known to be scavengers in the region, but they will also break into homes and attack the smallest people they can find, usually children. And since a typical hyena can weigh up to almost 200 pounds, they're considered more dangerous than a pack of wolves. Number 8. The photo shoot leopard. Definitely one of the most dangerous places to be attacked by an animal is on their home turf. And apparently, one of the most dangerous times to be attacked by a leopard is during a photo shoot. Seeing as leopards are extremely rare in the wild, people don't really get attacked by them in the bush. But at a recent photo shoot in Germany, at a retirement home for show animals, a model was left almost dead after being mauled by a leopard. The model's name is Jessica Leidoff, and she entered the leopard enclosure with the intention of taking some nice pictures. The leopard obviously didn't get the nice memo, though, because once the woman was inside the enclosure, it attacked her. It was such a brutal assault that the model was left with severe head injuries and had to be rushed to the specialty clinic. And here's where things got a little ironic. The model describes herself as an animal rights activist on her Instagram, saying she would love to be shot with any living animal as long as it didn't bring them unneeded stress. But as you can probably imagine, intruding into the leopard's home did indeed cause stress, so much that it tried to crush Jessica's skull with its teeth. Number 7. The Sundarbans. The most dangerous place in the world when it comes to tiger attacks is definitely India. It's an area called the Sundarbans, which stretches across Bangladesh. Tigers living in this jungle paradise killed roughly 22 people per year between 1947 and 1983. But before that, the brave people living in the region said tigers killed at least 50 or 60 people per year. This goes all the way back to ancient times, since tigers have ruled the area for thousands of years. When people began to move in, the tigers didn't really care for it. The powerful cats would destroy wooden boats, they would break into villages and eat children, and they would actively hunt the hunters and fishermen. Even today, the Sundarbans is a dangerous place to go. There are only 100 Bengal tigers left here, but it's still the largest single population of tigers living in one place anywhere on Earth. As for why the tigers here attack humans when the phenomenon doesn't really occur anywhere else, most experts say it's because of the seclusion. Tigers living in the Sundarbans never experienced widespread hunting by humans, so they never really had any fear of them. Instead, they came to see people as pests and sometimes dinner. Would you ever risk visiting a place famous for tiger attacks? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 6. Arizona Bee Swarm. If you're interested in being swarmed by bees and stung to death, you might want to move to Arizona. It's become one of the most dangerous places in the world for people allergic to bees. Just recently, a man was killed and 2 people were sent to the hospital after the trio was stung hundreds of times each by a swarm of menacing bees near the town of Tucson. The local authorities said many were attacked. 3 of them were attacked so viciously that they needed immediate medical attention. Seeing as one of them died, the stinging was about as severe as it gets. In fact, 3 of the firefighters sent to investigate the situation were also stung multiple times and had to run away. One of the firefighters was stung at least 60 times and himself had to be taken to the hospital. Finally, the authorities tracked down the source of the angry bees. There was an open hive in a nearby tree, estimated at over 100 pounds. This was a huge hive, and unfortunately, it's not even that rare in Arizona. According to the Carl Hayden Bee Research Center in Tucson, the large majority of swarms in Arizona are Africanized honeybees. These are also known as killer bees, mainly because they kill people. Even though swarms are usually docile, when they do flare up and get violent, people almost always end up dead. Number 5. Nunavut bears. If you ever wondered what it's like to be attacked by a polar bear, simply take a trip to the Canadian territory of Nunavut. This is the most dangerous place for polar bear attacks in the world. In 2021, 3 people were sent to the hospital after being ambushed by a single polar bear in the Baffin region of this remote place. According to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, all 3 of the individuals were seriously wounded but expected to make full recoveries. The officers were called to the small town of Sanarajak, where the incident occurred. 2 of the victims, both women, needed to be airlifted to the nearest hospital in Iqaluit, while the 3rd victim, a man, was in such bad condition that he had to be flown thousands of miles away to Ottawa. But this was hardly the first polar bear attack in the area. Experts say attacks are indeed rare, but fatal encounters are becoming increasingly more common. For example, in 2018, a man named Aaron Gibbons was killed by a polar bear while trying to protect his children from the rampaging beast. And that same summer, Daryl Connick, a local hunter, was murdered in cold blood by a polar bear while out on a hunting expedition. In conclusion, don't go to Nunavut unless you want to end up literally fighting a polar bear. Number 4. A deadly water well. In Indonesia, 2 people recently wound up dead at the bottom of a well because of a few snakes. 2 local residents of a small, rural village were trying to drain a well when the horrible incident occurred. The problem with the well was that it had been contaminated by rotting snake carcasses. For whatever reason, dozens of snakes had climbed into the well and died. The stench was disturbing the villagers, and with so many dead snakes, obviously the water wasn't the cleanest. So, the first villager entered the well using a rope to rappel to the bottom. He took with him a water pump, intending to slurp all the toxic water out of the well. Unfortunately, just minutes after he turned the water pump on, he began to have difficulty breathing. He became unresponsive and then went limp. The second villager, not quite realizing what was happening, then climbed into the well to save his neighbor. Unfortunately, he also ended up having breathing issues and passing out. The 2 men were found later, with the water pump still chugging away and spitting out toxic fumes. How did the 2 men die? It had nothing to do with the snake corpses or the contaminated well water. It was the water pump that released toxic fumes, which then became trapped inside the well. These guys literally suffocated to death. The point of the story is that if you go to Indonesia, look out for wells filled with snakes. You just might suffocate. Number 3. The Atlantic Ocean. Deborah Scalenkilly was 24 years old when she set out on a sailing trip from Maine to Florida. Unfortunately, she was sailing through the Atlantic Ocean, one of the most dangerous places in the world when it comes to marine predators. Her sailboat was swept up by a tropical storm and then flipped over, at which point Deborah was forced to watch as hungry Atlantic sharks ate her crew members one by one. According to her eyewitness account, it was her friend Meg who drew the sharks to them. She had slashed her leg when the yacht capsized, becoming a lure for the great whites in the area. The sharks smelled the blood and swarmed. The 5 surviving members of the crash managed to get onto a dislodged piece of the boat, using it as a raft. Over the next 5 days, 3 other crew members fell into the water and were ripped apart by sharks. Deborah could do nothing but hold on to the raft and watch in horror as her friends were eaten alive. After almost a week of misery, Deborah and the only other survivor, a guy named Brad, were rescued by a Russian cargo ship. They were glad to survive, but were sad for their friends who had been torn apart by the bloodthirsty apex predators. Number 2. The state of Texas. Texas is the most dangerous place in the United States of America when it comes to animal attacks. Texas has actually been named the state with the most deaths caused by animals every year. According to data from the CDC, looking at incidents between 1990 and 2019, Texas has approximately 520 reported deaths by animals. That's an average of 26 per year. And to make things even worse for Texas, the second deadliest state doesn't even come close. It's California, with only 299 deaths in the last 20 years. That's just around half of the fatalities from Texas. It's also in stark contrast to Delaware, Rhode Island, and North Dakota. All three haven't recorded a death from an animal in over 20 years. So, which animals are killing people in Texas? It's primarily brown bears, snakes, sharks, and alligators. Most of the attacks come from territorial brown bears, with sharks and snakes, first rattlesnakes, and then copperheads and cottonmouths, coming in a close second. Last in line are alligators, but don't forget the occasional cougar, as big cats also kill the occasional Texan. And number 1, Vancouver coyotes. The Canadian city of Vancouver is currently one of the most dangerous places in the world, where you could get attacked by a pack of wild coyotes. Specifically, the danger comes in the famous Stanley Park, located in the heart of the city. The Ministry of Forests recently had to order a cull of dozens of coyotes lurking in the park after a series of incidents involving humans being viciously attacked and purposely targeted by these oversized dogs. But it wasn't just a few incidents, it was more like 3 dozen. This was hugely alarming for one main reason. Up until recently, coyote attacks were rare. According to the U.S. Humane Society, more people are killed each year by golf balls than by coyote attacks. So, when there were 3 dozen attacks in a single month, the government of Vancouver had no choice but to step in and start dealing with the coyotes. But even with the cull underway, the city officials have warned citizens to stay out of the park after the sun goes down, lest they feel like being torn limb from limb by